Hi, everybody. Good to thank you. Good to see you here today on this beautiful fall morning. So I'm Teresa Reed. I'm the chair of the Washtenaw County Democratic Party. It's great to have you all here. Um, I'm reading the land acknowledgement first. This is the official MDP land acknowledgement. Washtenaw County occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi. The Washtenaw County Democratic Party recognizes historic indigenous communities in Michigan and those who were forcibly removed from their homelands. Washtenaw County occupies land ceded in the 1807 Treaty of Detroit. We further recognize the ongoing relationship of, dependence upon, and respect for all living beings of earth, sky, and water. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences. Thank you to our own Andrea Pierce of the Anishinaabe Caucus for making sure that that is available to us, and it's beautiful. All right. We got so much going on. Let me start with some easy stuff. First of all, let me just committee chairs, would you say hi? Stand up, wave, say hi. Thank you. Annie, Caroline, and not Caroline, Annie, Kathy, Janet. I can't even, Mary back there. Just wave a minute. Officers, thank you. All of these people work really, really hard as volunteers to keep this party going. And we're incredibly productive. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all of the volunteers who are knocking ourselves out to protect our democracy in these times. I want to mention a couple things right now. Well, actually, first, let me just, Ypsilanti Sunday is September 21st, 2 to 6 p.m. There's an info fair for all ages, art build, community music, and more. This will be out in front on the table. If somebody can grab this and put it out on the table. There's one out there. Okay, great. All right. And then I think I'm going to just jump right to one of the main things that we're doing right now in terms of protection of our democracy, and that is what we're calling Washtenaw Alliance 2026 Plus. We're working with other allies across the county, still building the coalition. Everybody is welcome to be part of the coalition to plan these monthly community potlucks. There'll be the second Sunday of every month. And this is the sign up link. We're not putting out the address because, you know, thanks to the other side of the aisle, we don't feel safe putting out the address. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's yeah, and so it's pretty easy, pretty intuitive. It's 9/14/25 potluck sign up at Bitly. So go there and sign up. There are a number of people in the room who have been participating in developing these potlucks. And if you want to jump up and say something about them, that would be great. Please don't let me just do it all by myself. But we're all feeling under attack because we are all under attack. We're all feeling a threat because we are at threat. Individually, many of us are individually a threat, and we're all, as Democrats and progressives and liberals, we're all under attack. One of the lessons of Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny, 20 lessons to, resist authoritarianism or something like that. I forget the subtitle of his book. Yeah. One of them is to practice corporeal politics, which is a fancy way of saying show up, put your body there, take a stand. And so that's part of what we're doing with the potlucks. They're Sunday afternoons, 5 to 8 p.m. And we're going to be using the indivisible groups, 1 Million Rising framework for helping us all. I've found it very, very useful, helping us all think about where do we fit in not just resistance to authoritarian regime, but also prevention of authoritarian regime. As we all know, we're way down the road, way far down the road. But what can we do? Where do we fit in? How can we undermine that work? How do we join with others to undermine that work? How do we do it individually? How do we move large systems to refuse to support this work? It is something that we all have to do together. And that's the point of the potlucks. Thank you. Janet, yeah. Yeah, come on up. Janet is the co-chair of the Precinct Organizing Committee with Josh McAllister, formerly with me. And yeah.
Many incarnations. Just to say that as a somewhat corollary and a different level of activation, we are also looking with precinct organizing to have many small gatherings, neighborhood gatherings. We've got a first one going in precinct 324, which is roughly in Burns Park. Backyard gathering. We're going to orient these two very localized groups. We're very interested in supporting anyone who would like to do something on that line, to have help organizing something local, to bring in people and to get them more active so that people begin to sort of rebuild what they used to have, where you had a precinct representative who really knew the people in their neighborhood. We have a number of people who've done this, who have built little models of how to do this. It's not rocket science. It just takes a little time. And we would really love to help anybody who's interested in doing that. So please get in touch with me.
Thank you. Yeah, that is like so important. Showing up in your neighborhood and standing up in your neighborhood. And we know it's really scary to go door to door sometimes, but you know some of your neighbors, and you know some of your neighbors, and say, let's get together, let's practice some of these strategies for resisting tyranny. So there's a lot of ways to do it, and if you're a precinct delegate, you should be working on this. And if you're not, if you're a precinct volunteer, and you should be working on this. And if you're a precinct volunteer but not a precinct delegate, stand up and say, I'll be a precinct delegate. Carol Polverini is one of the many people who's been an area captain for us for years now. We have the whole county organized. If we have 15 different areas, each of which comprises a number of precincts. And in order to organize, we've got this planned that way. And our county committee, there's vertical integration with members of the county committee who line up with these 15 areas for organizing. And it's really time to go, right? It's time to get this going. The area captains organize within their areas, which are bigger, you know, as I said, several different precincts. So Janet and Josh McAllister and other members of the precinct organizing committee are constantly working really hard to get us up and moving together. I do want to also note, I'll put this up later, mivoter.org. mivoter.org. This was developed by Washtenaw County volunteers, WCDP volunteers. It is an incredibly hard thing to do. And it is a year-round source of information about, right now, first of all, who represents you and how do you contact them by your street address at all levels. And also, where are the protests near me? Where can I put my body next? That's all in mivoter.org, which has been adopted by the Michigan Democratic Party as its major organizing source. In the fall, we're closer to election time in 26, not in the fall elections for 25, but in 26, that also contains our endorsements for all of the positions from, I was going to say president, but not that, but from Senate to library board. So don't ever, I mean, put mivoter.org in your phone, bookmark it, and use it all the time. I want to bring up Ian Robinson. Ian is chair of, or president, I guess, of the Huron Valley Area Labor Federation. Ian and we, HVALF, and we are working together on these potlucks, and also Ian is pulling together what he has called, what we're calling the Rapid Response Network. So here you go.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. So good to be here. Good to see you all here today. Just telling you a little bit about the Rapid Response Network. Some of you may already be on it. Huron Valley Area Labor Federation, which is roughly 31 unions and about 21,000 union members, created this Rapid Response Network, or began the process of creating it back in February in response to the national AFL-CIO, which sent out a message to all of its CLCs and ALFs saying everyone ought to create one of these. They did not provide any operating instructions about like, well, how would you do that? And what would this do? But what we decided that we would do was basically three things. First, build a list of people, both union and non-union, who want to stand up and do something about the assault on democracy, the assault on human and worker rights that is underway and is gathering momentum. And, you know, in the first instance, let those folks know when events are coming up. So here's an event coming up that we're helping to co-organize along with the VA union on Wednesday, the 17th of this month. Between 2:30 and 4:30, there'll be a rally at the VA, across the street from the VA, actually, across Fuller Road from VA. So we'll be notifying people on our list to show up for that and things like that. It doesn't have to be something we're involved in. If we support it, if we think it's fighting for the general principles that we support, then we'll advertise and encourage. Yeah, it's Wednesday, September 17th, 2:30 to 4:30. Across the street from the VA, across from Fuller Road from the VA. More details to come. I'm going to send this around because I forgot to bring our fancy sign-up sheets. If you want to be part of the Rapid Response Network, just add your name to that list and I'll add you later today. So the first thing is that, notifying people, getting union and non-union people both working together. Right now we have approximately 263 people in this Rapid Response Network. 53% of them are union, 47% are non-union. So it's good to be able to bring those folks together. The second thing we need to do, though, is turning out for rallies isn't really going to do the trick, standing up to fascism in our country. We're going to need to have people who are comfortable with, able to, willing to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience on a large scale in a coordinated fashion. And we don't know how to do that. Most of us have never done it. Certainly labor has not done a whole lot of that. Strikes, I guess you could say, are a kind of, but generally the strikes are within the law. They're not civil disobedience. They're not going up against a government that's trying to crush all unions either. So, you know, this is a different ball game, and we think we need to run workshops that people in the Rapid Response Network are encouraged to come to so that we can begin to become more familiar with strategies involving this and the tactics and just the practicalities of it as well. That's the second thing. And then the third thing is to build ties with organizations like the Washtenaw County Dems, like A2D2, like Ann Arbor Indivisible, and their regional and national levels, so that we're coordinated, that we're not a bunch of groups that actually agree on 90% of what we think about what's going on and yet are not really coordinated. So that's what we're going to, that's the third task we're having. We've already had one meeting of a number of leaders of local groups that are kind of aligned with this sense of what we need to be doing. And we're having another one later today at my house. So we're starting to build those ties. So those are the three main things we're up to. One last thing that's been added to our original three is some kind of secure communications mechanisms for getting not only to our people on the list, but to the other orgs that we're coordinating with in the event that, you know, some of our more conventional means get shut down, taken over, or other things that could very well happen. So I'll pass it back to you.
Don't go away. So everything he said, and so Ian actually is going to be presenting about power mapping for resistance movements at our first potluck a week from tomorrow. Which is really important. And that program for that potluck will be really presenting the framework provided by Indivisible National for 1 Million Rising, presenting the conceptual framework for resisting authoritarian movements. It's really, really good. I mean, I found it extremely valuable for myself. I guess that's all I want to add to that. It's really important work. Oh, is this in the Progress Michigan, the coalition calendar? Because if it's not, when it is, it'll be on mivoter.org. It has to be in that calendar to be on mivoter.org. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we've got to get that in there so everybody can find it just through mivoter. Okay. Okay, everybody. We have a lot of people to talk today. Jeff Irwin is here. Senator Jeff Irwin is here to talk to us about what the hell is going on in Lansing. It's just it's a microcosm of what the hell is going on in DC, and our Congresswoman Debbie Dingell is here to talk about that. So Debbie, come on up. Debbie is everywhere all the time.
Well, good morning, everybody. So, Ian, I love listening to you, but don't stop protesting either. We can't, one of the things that I'll talk about Washington in a minute, but I just want to say to you that one of the things that struck me about August, and we were out there, I want to thank all of the state legislators. Unlike Republicans who run away and don't do any town halls, we did more than 20 town halls in August, and I have another one today at 1. So we don't hide, we get out there and we talk to people. People are tired, they don't know what to do, they're scared, they're discouraged. And it is the collective we that is going to push back on this fascist in the White House. And we can't get tired. That's what he wants to do. If you look at what happened in Nazi Germany in the 30s, people are scared now. I'm going to tell you all this. I am out there and I have been helping many different groups do many different things, and they're afraid to even come to you and tell you because they're afraid they'll get a target on their back or they'll be hurt in some way. And I want to be very careful about what I say here because I am not going to be able to fix everything. I'm not going to, but for instance, something happened this week in Washtenaw, and I was immediately notified about it, and I immediately got on it, and I was able to keep something from happening, which I don't want the world to know because I'm not going to be able to do it every time, but because they told me and nobody had been taken to a detention center and I could go in and fight the fight. It's very hard to get somebody out of a detention center, but if you can get in there right away and make the case, you can convince people to release somebody. If you know about Head Start early, when Head Start in June told me, but they were afraid to tell me. I was at something, and on a Friday, they say, oh, and we haven't heard anything, and if we don't by next Friday, we're going to have to start to lay off people and tell people we're going to close. And I went, whoa, tell me more. And then found out that there were 60 Head Starts that were going to be shut down because they had closed the regional office and nobody had gotten their funding. And that group didn't want to talk to me because they were scared to death. But Wayne Metro was very good with Lewis. I called Rashida, and the two of us got on and were relentless. And those Head Starts were not shut down. Nobody had to lay off, and we were able to fix it. You don't read about it in the paper because I don't need to have what we do read about in the paper. But I need to know. I'm not going to be able to fix everything. But if we know there are problems, if people are losing grants, let us go and fight. And know that we know in the state legislatures, I want you to know how close the federal, state, and local work. We know how to work together. We know how to do things behind the scenes to try to not get targets on people's backs. We can't fix everything, but we are able to fix some things. So that's the first thing. And it's every day. It's relentless. You're on a plane for an hour and a half and you get off the plane and there are 10 crises, including changing the Defense Department to the War Department, but that's what I want to say to people is Donald Trump is managing by chaos. There are so many things going on that you don't know what to fight. You're tired. You think you don't make a difference. And we have lost, anybody who's heard me speak, we do not have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of media, or due process in this country anymore. That is a fact. but we can't accept it. We got to fight back in every way possible. So we still have to. Donald Trump isn't stupid. When he sees us protesting and he sees mass numbers, it computes with him. So I don't know what the future holds, and we cannot be intimidated into silence, and we cannot be afraid to stand up and speak out. That's what, in Germany, they became afraid. And we can't. And I'm going to tell you, I'm very lucky. There, I get a lot of support, but I'm good. I'll thank her. I go when there is a protest. I go and try to, be supportive. If I don't get yelled at least once a day, I mean, very publicly and sometimes in not good ways, hey, it's a bad day. But every now and then I bite. And he saved I was at the protest over by Zingerman's 3 weeks ago. No, but it was important to go out there. And a woman started screaming at me and telling me I didn't say hello to her and I didn't like women and dogs. I mean, it's the truth. He heard it. And then she said, blame me for what was happening in the country. And I said, me? What about your president? That's when decided he better go in and not keep me from killing her. And he got her for 35 minutes. It's the truth, guys. And thankfully, no one got me on it. It is. He did. He got her for 35 minutes. And by the way, he's my witness. I said hello to her the minute she said hello. And the next week when I was at something and a woman told me, you gotta go. You've ruined education in this country. I wanted to say, me? What about that asshole that eliminated the Department of Education? But then I thought of you in the Saturday before, and I behaved. But we can't be silent. We do have to push back. And that's one of the messages I want to say to everybody. And we are an area that knows that we have each other's back. So Washington's just totally fucked up. But we're not going to stop fighting. I don't know what is going to happen with the budget. I think there's a 50-50 chance the government could shut down. But I have to, look, I'm not going to be quiet. You all know that I'm not somebody who's quiet. And I will push back. There are Republicans on the Appropriations Committee. Tom Cole on the Republican side, Susan Collins, on the House side, and Susan Collins, who know it's insanity to shut the government down. They're trying to do, I don't know what's going to happen and we're trying to negotiate, can we get the Medicaid cuts back? We need to start talking about it. One, if there is a Republican shutdown, if there is a shutdown of the government, we may need to make it a Republican shutdown. The White House the Republicans control the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. If they want to keep the government open, they're the ones that have the votes to keep the government open. We are not going to let them do anything to destroy healthcare more, to endanger the safety of any person, and we are going to fight to protect economics for people. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm sitting in meetings with the Akeem every day. It's just not clear what they want or what they're willing to do. But one of the things I want us to start talking about is most people haven't focused on this, but the affordability tax credit, I'm so tired, you guys. The Affordable Care Tax Credit expires at the end of the year, but you will start to go on the website for Affordable Care in November, and Blue Cross Blue Shield has already asked for an increase of the rates by 18%, which is, outrageous. And I said to the CEO, it's bullshit. People can't afford it. And it's because of the Medicaid bill that passed. So we need to start talking about Republicans, they're the ones that can do it or not. They don't like it. They think it's bad public policy. Okay, you want to cut Medicaid, knock 16, 17, 18 million people off Medicaid, and now you want people not to be able to get health care through the Affordable Care Act? Hold them accountable. Wrap it around their necks. So we gotta. But we need to, and I want to say this, I've been very blunt with Hakeem and Schumer, that people want us to be more than anti-Trump. we need to be for. And we're starting to flesh out. I'm open, anybody who has thoughts, please do share them. I think the number one issue that you hear on most people's minds is affordable care. Not affordable care, affordability. I'm really tired. I could tell you a story of the police coming to my house in the middle of the night and my not answering the door because of Minnesota. And it's just been, you got to learn to get a sense of humor about, but it's the truth. The officer said to me, but we're the police. I went, yeah. And so is the guy that murdered the people in Minnesota. He dressed up as the police. And when you were on that list, you're careful. I'm trying to laugh. But so I don't know what's going to happen with the budget. The governor's going to get back, and I want to work with the state legislators so that, Fred Upton, who was a Republican congressman from here, went to CVS, he's 72, to get a COVID shot, was not given a COVID shot. Can't get it. So we know that it's not working. So we need to, as a state with a Democratic governor, see what we can do to help make sure. And, if you watch Trump, and I try not to take my eyes off him for too long because you don't know the next dangerous thing he's doing. He did say that he has some concerns about Florida eliminating all vaccines, which may be the beginning of Donald Trump realizing what an asshole, I'm sorry, my language is like it is today, at HHS is, and how he's endangering the public health of every person in America. So we got to fight back on that. I could just go through the list. It was great being home for the month of August. We really tried to be everywhere, and I worked with all of our state legislators to be accessible, to listen, to know what people are talking about, what's, what we need to be fighting for. Being back in Washington last week was absolutely many things. And I met with some of the Epstein survivors, and that was very emotional and difficult. And I hope that and Donald Trump does not want them to make these lists public. And they want to keep anybody from having to go through what they went through again. Donald Trump was threatening Republicans, which is what he does on everything and anything. And they are literally afraid of him. And that is scary. So we'll have to see what happens this week. We have 215 signatures. We need 3 more on the discharge petition, and we'll see what happens on that. And it's going to be in Washington and Lansing. September is going to be a hell of a month. So is that enough? I got hands. Yes.
If there's only 3 signatures short on that petition, who can we call?
Republicans. But
Any Republican that hasn't signed? Okay.
correct. But
How do we-
I wouldn't waste my time on Tim Walberg.
I wouldn't either, but if you have any suggestions.
Some of the other women.
Okay.
And there were some people that were, like even MEGA is trying to hold people accountable on this. And I have to tell you, someone said, what's with Marjorie Taylor Greene? It is crazy, but she was very real out there, and she does want those. So just remember, you never know who your allies are going to be in whatever fight. Well, yeah, that's true too, but she is she's crazy, but she's a believer. Mayor.
I agree.
Good morning. Thank you for all the hard work you're doing in DC. But I'm starting to carry this around now,
Constitution.
the Constitution. Thank you, Debbie. I got these from you. Thank you. I don't know if this worked. This is not working. This is not working. I grew up thinking that this worked, but now I'm saying it's not working. If we have people, we need to tell who caused all of this. The Trump voters, the Republicans in both houses, and the Supreme Court. The Senate we talk about Trump. The Senate confirmed all those people that's in those cabinet positions. He can nominate from here to wherever. If the Senate didn't confirm them, they wouldn't be in there. So we need to be saying who has caused all of this. It's not Project 25, it's the Senate. It's the senators. They knew RFK was an idiot, but they confirmed him. We got doctors sitting up there in the Senate, know better, and they confirmed these people. I was in the civil rights movement. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. I grew up in the civil rights movement. We were afraid. You think we weren't afraid? If you are afraid, you're in the wrong business. You need to get out of Congress. You need to get out of Congress if you're afraid, because we need you fighting, not telling us you scared. Get out and let somebody else in who's not afraid, who's going to fight. That's my
And you
message.
can look at your Michigan senators' votes too. I'll just leave it at that. I told Teresa I might misbehave.
Real quick, I want to publicly thank Debbie. Not only is she working incredibly hard, but I know that she receives on a regular basis credible death threats. So when she is putting herself on the line, she is seriously putting herself on the line to fight for us, for our country, for individual people who are who are suffering and things are going to get worse. So again, thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. You keep, I'm not gonna,
Thank you, Kathy.
I love you, but you elect me to not to be tough. I triggered Donald Trump and I'm proud of it.
Yes.
Representative Dingell, thank you for your service. Have the House Democrats coalesced around a single issue that they can draw a red line around, like the restoration of the Medicaid cuts, to say, no, we would rather shut the government down than pass a budget unless you restore this, like the Warren proposal? Is there a single issue or a couple issues that you said?
Well, that's one of the discussions that has been put on the
Okay.
table.
Can you make that public, please? So we know.
I think Hakeem has said it this week. If you listen to, he has said that he is, so Hakeem and Schumer have been talking all week and he has said some of that publicly and we've made it clear we got to know how we're, yeah.
Thank you.
I have this for a second. I just also for Debbie, thank you so much. I also just want to say, we hear so much crap about what the Democrats don't do. I am sick to death of that. I also have some frustration about what Democrats don't do, but it's Republicans who put us here. So let's just be super clear about that. Every single Republican voted against the new Voting Rights Act a couple years ago. Every single one of them. So, we had 2 Democrats who should have agreed to break the filibuster on that. Yes, we hate them. I hate them too. But it was every single Republican. They are in lockstep to destroy our democracy. So let's just be super clear about who our allies are, okay? Any other questions for Debbie? Yeah. Tom?
Yeah,
Where's Tom? Right there.
right there. Yep.
Do you have any suggestions about a group or political party organization that might be willing to do something to publicize the Campbell coal plant problems where that has been reinitialized and
Well,
maybe get us to protest it at MPSC when it comes up because the Attorney General's
LCV is working this. I mean, I talk about
Okay.
it because one of the outrages is that nobody wants it. And I actually did a press conference on it with LCV and some of the other groups. I can't even remember when I did it. I did. But don't you think LCV has been trying to publicize it? And we've been trying to talk about how everybody's paying for it. It's the rate increases. I've talked about it on national television, but the environmental groups are even, I have to say, I got to give, um, I'm always yelling at DTE, but the Consumers Power credit for making that point. So keep it up, but the environmentalists are on it. Kathy?
Oh, 1 second here.
I've been reading recently and using AI, and I'm wondering if the Democratic Party is organized and has the technological wherewithal to address some of the conspiracies and possibly truths about other countries using AI to try to influence the 2026 elections.
So look, I am somebody who doesn't trust AI, but by the way, I want people to understand that Russia and China have interfered in our elections in the past, and we need to expect it and be prepared for it in 2026. So yes, people are on, but then everybody thinks it's a conspiracy theory and the Republicans deny it. So we have to be alert. What Ian's doing is, what's more important than anything that you're doing is to help create the echo chamber that the Republicans have. We have to compete with them on social media. That's also very important about what you are doing. But yes, people are prepared. They're very good. And we should be.
Yeah.
Here, he's had his hand up long.
1 second.
And this will be the last question because Jeff's been patient.
I just want to make sure that the diversion that the Republicans and Trump are doing right now to avoid the Epstein files, how can we make sure that we keep the pressure on him for that? I've got an article here that I'll pass around. It's about Katie Johnson. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's from 2016, and it's pretty interesting to go through. But what can we do to make sure that, like, the stupid stuff that he says, well, we're going to do this today. Well, the latest thing today was Trump was part of the FBI that was in
Mike Johnson
yeah,
floated that in an
yeah.
interview yesterday.
And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Said he was an FBI informant.
Yeah, yeah.
So
how do we keep?
we're going to, first of all, I can't think of two better people. Tom Massey, who is a Republican, who I've had my moments with. We had a Karen moment a couple of years ago, but he is, the president hates him. They're doing everything they can to defeat him. With Ro Khanna are out there taking the lead. And the press conference that they had this week, quite frankly, everybody said they had never seen such a well-attended press conference in their life. The survivors who I did meet with, this is something that's survivors, period, domestic violence and sexual assault, I work. And they said, if they're not going to release a list, we are creating, you may have seen this in their press conference, we're creating our own list and we will release it. So we are not going away on this. I promise you, we are not going to go away on this. But that's what they did? You may not know this. I were getting these notices that there was going to be a flyover on the Capitol. And later in the day, it was deliberate. They scheduled the flyover and then the flyover is delayed. They waited until the press conference started so they do a flyover that would distract them from the press conference. And I wasn't there because I was in committee defending AI and healthcare and how we need guardrails. But everybody said they were so proud of the survivors. They didn't get rattled. They kept on talking, but they did that to distract. That's what Donald Trump does. I don't know what he would, when he says, I'm going to rename the Defense Department, the Department of War, he's trying to take a track. That is what he does. When he doesn't like what's happening, he tries to get everybody to look at the next thing. And we cannot take our eyes off what are the real issues we need to be focused on.
You know what, Debbie? I'd like to work with you to get the names of a few women in Congress that we should all call and write to. We'll put a CTA, a call to action, in the next newsletter on Thursday. So look for it for Thursday for people to call to say, please join the discharge petition to get those names, to get those files released. Okay. Thanks, Debbie. Thank you so much. Charlie, you come on up too real quick. What? No, yeah, Jeff's next. No, Jeff, you too. But Charlie, just real quick, can you do a real quick on investing in my kids? After Jeff? Okay, fine. Most people know our Senator Jeff Irwin. Yay, Jeff Irwin. Long-serving senator and programs co-chair Annie Somerville, and County Commissioner Annie Somerville is Jeff's chief of staff. I don't know how she does it. Anyway, Jeff's here to help us understand what the heck is going on in Lansing and what we can do about it.
Thanks, Teresa. Good morning, everybody.
Please help me with my petitions. You don't have to, and I always
Yeah.
forget to do that.
Do you have them here today? Or do you have them here today?
I always feel guilty because I never say it.
Yeah, well, I think after that presentation from Debbie and the many others we've heard, hopefully everybody's eager to sign that petition. So you've got Debbie's petition back there. Can you raise your hand? And Bella, wave your hand. All right, so I hope everybody signs Debbie's petition. I'll try to make sure to do that before I leave. Before I talk about the state budget, I want to say a couple of things that I always feel like I should say in this moment. One is thank you for the opportunity to work for you all, to represent you all in Lansing. It's a tremendous honor. It's tremendously important. I also want to just take a moment to call out the creeping authoritarianism in our federal government, the attacks on our democracy, the attacks on our rights, the attacks on our economy. And I think that the Congresswoman covered that very well. I'm not going to go deep on that, but I do want to mention it. And I also want to mention that there was a lot of talk just a second ago about distraction. And I think that that talk was a lot about, the Epstein files. And I think there's a lot of public concern about that. But I think that Donald Trump and the Republicans are trying to distract from something else as well. And what they're trying to distract from as well is that right now, our economy is struggling. Prices are going up, up, up. If you've been to the grocery store recently, you'll notice that all of his campaign promises that none of us in this room thought he was going to keep, he's not keeping. He's not keeping any of the promises to stop the wars, but he's also not keeping promises to lower prices. And that's another thing they very much want to distract against or distract from. And here in Michigan, they also want to distract from how these trade policies are not just increasing prices, but they're also crushing manufacturing and hurting our state. I heard one of my colleagues say yesterday that if there's a physical battleground for Donald Trump's war, it's Michigan and it's Michigan's economy. And so I'm really frustrated about how our relationship with Canada is being affected, how it's affecting our economy, as well as everything about the Epstein situation. So, we need to continue to fight for what's right, and that's what we're trying to do in Lansing. And right now, the same sort of chaos, dysfunctionality, and often illegal actions that you're seeing in DC out of the Republicans in DC, the Lansing Republicans are taking a page out of that same book, and they're doing the same sorts of things. And we haven't gotten much done this year in a policy, respect, because Matt Hall said very plainly at the beginning of the year, I'm not going to do any Democratic bills. That's the kind of hyper partisanship that we're dealing with in Lansing. When even bills that pass the Michigan Senate with unanimous votes, or 37-1, even bills that are incredibly bipartisan, they're refusing to bring them up just to try to put gum in the gears of our system. And just because, I think their political program is to tell the public that government doesn't work. So when they're in control, they have to deliver on that. That seems to be the one promise that they're willing to deliver on. So instead of, passing policy bills on prices or on education or on reading or on helping foster kids or, instead of that, we've got this constant partisan bickering, this hyper-partisanship out of the House. And I just want to say to my fellow Democrats that if you watch closely what's happening in Lansing, one of the things I hope you'll notice is that the Senate Democrats are talking about real issues: education, clean water, safety in our communities, strong infrastructure. You know, we're trying to have serious conversations about issues like that, mental health, healthcare. The Republicans just spent the last week doing another bill trying to ban transgender people from using bathrooms. They're so fixated on these hyper-partisan, hyper-political issues that they're trying to use that as their main program. And it's very frustrating for those of us who got into public service because we want to make a better future for the people in this room and the people we'll never meet coming after us. It's very frustrating. But having said all that, for sort of like preambulatory, my job here is to talk about the budget and what's happening in the budget. I'm going to talk a little bit about the timing, and then I'm going to talk about some of the details. I'm not going to be able to cover everything. Hopefully I'll go quickly without speaking way too fast. And I want to leave some room for questions. So a little bit on the timing. So there's a normal budget process in Michigan that we've been following for decades, longer than I've been involved in government. And usually the way it works is the governor will put out their budget in February, maybe early March. The legislature will debate that throughout the spring. And then usually budgets are passed in both the House and the Senate in May or June. And then we have a law that says the budget has to be done by July 1st. A law that most of the current House Republicans voted for, by the way. What happened this year was the governor submitted her budget on time. The Senate did its work on time. We passed budgets both for the school aid budget and the general fund budget in May. And the Republicans didn't pass a budget. They want so much to shut down state government and to use the leverage of a shutdown to help them that they dragged their feet all the way into deep into August. And they didn't even pass a budget until deep into August. And so now we've got about a month to get a budget done before the October 1st deadline, because the state runs on an October 1st to September 30th budget. And if we don't get a state budget signed by October 1st, the state government shuts down. And so by them passing a budget so late in the process, that makes it very, very difficult to negotiate all the many differences between their budget and our budget. Not sure what else there is to say about timing, except for to maybe talk a little bit about why are they doing this? Why wouldn't they want to like get their ideas on the table in June and really have time to like hammer it out and really debate with us about the merits of their arguments? Well, you know, when they're focused on things like bathroom policies, their arguments don't have merit. They're doing this because they think it, if I'm being charitable, they think it gives them more leverage in the budget process. You know, they believe, I think, Republicans believe that Democrats actually care about public employees and the people they serve. We care about the people who are out there providing mental health services at CMHs. We care about the people who are at MSP who are providing public safety services. We care about the teachers. And then we also care about all the kids that are being educated, all the people who are receiving that work. And so they want to leverage our care and concern for the people who do public service and leverage that against us. They know that if they get right up to the brink, our concern for those people might cause us to make deals with them that we wouldn't otherwise make. I think the other reason why they're so late this year, if I'm speculating, is because I think they've struggled to even get the votes. If you look at how they did this House budget in late August, they didn't release that budget to the members until 1 hour before the vote. 800-page budget, 1 hour before the vote. Now, they knew that the members couldn't actually understand what was in that budget. And when you hear some of the details of it, maybe you'll come to the same conclusion that I have, which is that it was critical for the Republican leadership that their members not understand what was in the bill because it's so terrible that they wouldn't vote for it. And as a little piece of evidence to back up that supposition, that speculation, when they passed their school aid budget earlier in the summer, because they did pass the school aid budget in late June, they really struggled to pass that because their initial proposal was to cut higher ed across the board. They were going to cut pretty much every institution in the state by about 25%, and then they were going to cut U of M by 92%. They couldn't get the votes for that. And why couldn't they get the votes for that? Because when their members who represent Lake State and who represent CMU and who represent Grand Valley and who represent Northern Michigan University, when they saw that, they saw those cuts, 15 to 25% for those institutions, they said, well, I can't vote for that. And so in the end, when they finally did that higher ed budget, they cut U of M and MSU by about 75%, but they actually didn't cut all the smaller institutions because they couldn't get the votes. And I think that they knew with their general fund budget that if they showed the members what was actually in there, they couldn't have gotten the votes and they were really struggling to get the votes. But anyway, they did get the votes for their budget. And now we're moving on to the point where the House and the Senate are negotiating differences. Now I'm going to split this up into two pieces, the school aid budget and the general budget. So just focusing on school aid. The good news here is that in Michigan, we segregate revenue to the school aid budget from the rest of the budget. And the good news is that because of that, the sort of bottom line that both the Democrats and the Republicans are working from is the same. It's the same roughly $21 billion education budget. Now, there are some ways to, cut into that, fund more of it with more higher ed with that and things to, flex to the general ed budget. But the reason why I have a little bit more hope on school aid and getting that done is because the bottom line is ultimately the same. And what we're really arguing about is how to allocate the same amount of money. That gives me hope that we can get a deal on this that's a little more reasonable. The other thing that gives me hope is that when you look at these two budgets, what Democrats are fighting for, once again, are things that matter, and what Republicans are fighting for are just hyper-partisan political nonsense. So let me tell you what I mean. In the Democratic school aid budget, the differences that we're fighting for, the things that we're trying to make happen, are grants for small class sizes, extra support for literacy. We just passed a landmark literacy law last fall. That was my bill. I'm very proud of it. We need to invest in driving that success home with more literacy coaches, more training for our educators. Republicans didn't want to fund that. We're proposing to continue with school safety and mental health grants. We know that mental health is a huge issue in our schools. Previously, we had put grants in specifically to deal with safety and mental health. Last year, the Republicans during the election decried that we were cutting these funds from the budget and said that they thought that was terrible. This year, they proposed cutting all those funds in the budget. Make sense of that. Senate Democrats are also pushing for universal breakfast and lunch in all schools for all kids. We're doing this because we know, thank you, we know kids learn better. We know that it reduces stigma, and we also know it's more efficient when you don't have to pay school employees to figure out who gets a lunch and who doesn't. This universal policy is a big savings to parents in terms of time and money, and it's working well, and we want to preserve it. And so that's what we're fighting for in the school aid budget. There are more details than that, but those are some of the big ones. School-based health centers, there's other things. But what the Republicans' entire budget is hinging on is taking all of that money and then also using some other accounting gimmicks to try to fold it all into a bigger per pupil amount. So you might have heard in the news that Republicans are proposing a really big school aid budget. It's the same amount of money. They're just taking, it's all about, do you put money in this pocket or do you put money in that pocket? And we're trying to put some money on the table that requires schools to do some of these things on literacy and small class sizes. And they want to get rid of those requirements and just lean on, one single allotment that each district gets full flexibility with. But the other thing they did is that in order to get that extra money, it's not extra money, in order to get the money that you would have otherwise gotten through the small class size grants and the school safety grants and the literacy grants and the universal lunch grants, in order to get that money that they've now tried to push over into the general pot, you have to not have any diversity programs. You have to not have multi-sex or multi-stall unisex bathrooms. Like once again, we're fighting for trying to make education better. They're fighting to try to drive political wedges that they think are going to help them next November. And I just want people to know the details, because when we talk to our friends and family and people who live in other places about what's happening in Lansing, I want you to know what is the actual difference between what we're fighting for and what they're fighting for. They're fighting to make life more difficult for transgender people, which is really just a political effort on their part to try to get more votes and to try to drive fear and difference among people in our community. And we're fighting for making schools actually better. I mentioned accounting gimmicks. At the risk of going on too long, I just want to give you an example of what I mean by that. So last year, one of the things we did was we changed how schools pay for pensions. And we basically did it in a way where the state takes on more of that responsibility. And that means that $500 a year is now going to classrooms that otherwise would have gone into the school districts having to pay back to the pension system. Republicans want to roll that back. And so whenever you hear them say, oh, we've got this huge plan to give more money to schools, it's not real. It's not real. They're taking money from these important priorities to try to justify that claim. And they're also engaging in these accounting gimmicks, like changing how the pension system works, that actually doesn't help schools. It pulls money out of the classrooms. Why are they doing this? They're doing it because it's good for their charter school donors. Charter schools benefit tremendously by not having to pay into the pension, by not having to transport kids, by not having to take special ed students and all sorts of things. And they want to punctuate that advantage that charter schools already have. Okay, I'm going to move on to the main budget now because I talked too much. So what happened is the Republicans just passed this budget a couple weeks ago. I want to mention though, it wasn't just Republicans, it was Republicans and one Democrat. So there's one Democrat who voted for their terrible budget. Her name is Karen Whitsett. She represents the city of Detroit. She's currently running for city council against an amazing candidate named Denzel McCampbell. Denzel McCampbell is a tremendous guy and I hope he beats her because she voted for this. And I don't usually like to use my time here to point out some of the limitations of some of my Democratic colleagues, but this one is special. Okay, so they passed this budget, and I think the most important thing that you need to know is that what the Republicans did is they slashed billions of dollars all over state government in ways that will hurt Michigan, and in some ways that actually are just fantasy. But they did it all to make room for more road funding. Right. So the big thing that they put into their budget was a 50% increase in roads. We spend about $6 billion a year on roads. They want to kick it up to about 9.5 billion. You know, this is something, frankly, that our governor has supported in concept. But when you actually do the math and you see who has to pay for that and you see who benefits from it, I don't think it adds up to something that I could support. So I'm not going to cover everything, just the lowlights. Huge cuts to mental health, public health, and services to seniors. So about $5 billion in cuts to human services, 3.8 billion from Medicaid and behavioral health alone. So when we think about the mental health crisis we have, when we think about the opioid crisis, we think about all the folks here in Washtenaw County government who do work through CMH to help people who are severely mentally ill or people who are maybe mild to moderate mental illness and need a little bit of help sometimes. All of those services are going to be put under tremendous pressure when you see this kind of like roughly 17% cut off from the bottom line. Another $1 billion that they're cutting from other human services. I'm not going to be able to talk about all of them, but let me just talk about one. Many of you have heard me talk here and at my coffee hours and whatnot have heard me talk about home and community-based services. This is incredibly important to me. We have a lot of disabled people and we have way more seniors who want to age in place. Thank you, Jim. They want to stay in their home, right? And we know that they'll be happier, they'll be healthier, they'll live longer, and they'll cost the public less if we provide the services to them in their home. But for years, we have paid these in-home care workers a criminally low wage. When I got to Lansing in 2019, they were making about $10.50 statewide for this job. It's bullshit. And so we've been working really hard for the last 6 years. We've gotten about $4 an hour in wage increases for these direct care workers who serve almost 1 million people, hundreds of thousands of people in our state. And the Republicans are proposing rolling back that whole $4 wage increase, driving these 70,000 direct care workers down to minimum wage. And I think it's deeply irresponsible. It's terrible. It's terrible. I'll just point out that the Michigan Hospital Association, a Republican organization, by the way, they wouldn't agree with that characterization, but that's how I would characterize them. They said that this budget will result in hospitals cutting services, rural hospitals closing down, and the loss of 20,000 healthcare workers in the state if this budget goes through. So that's what, you know, a conservative business group is saying about this. They want to cut SNAP by $333 million. They want to get rid of Double Up Food Bucks, which is a program that allows SNAP recipients to go to farmers markets and get fresh, healthy food and support our farmers as well. They want to cut half of the water quality staff at the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. So half of the people who protect drinking water and our water resources here in the Great Lakes, they want to get rid of half of them. They want to roll back PFAS standards in the budget. Weird way to do that, but they propose that. They're proposing cutting public safety, which was a bit of a surprise to me. They want to cut 300 positions from Michigan State Police, and they want to cut 775 positions from the Michigan Department of Corrections. I'm going to talk about corrections a little bit because they're claiming that they're cutting vacant positions at the Department of Corrections, but they can only do that if they've never thought about our prisons for like more than 5 minutes. We have had a staffing crisis in our prison for years and years. And what that requires is that requires all the COs to do mandatory overtime. And the COs, the corrections officers, are begging to hire more people, but they can't hire those more people because it's not a very great job. And so what they're now proposing, what the Republicans are proposing is, okay, you've got these 775 positions that are vacant. Let's just cut them and use it for roads. Well, where do you think those 700 positions, where do you think the dollars for those 700 positions are going? They're going to pay the overtime for the employees who are working those hours. So this is what I mean by some of their cuts are just fantasy. Like they either don't understand or they don't want to understand how it actually works. And so they make proposals that don't make sense. They want to cut workforce development programs like Going Pro, apprenticeship programs. They want to cut the Attorney General and the Secretary of State's office. That's all political. They just don't like them as people. But I'll tell you what, the Attorney General brings in billions of dollars to the state of Michigan in settlements. Whether you like the Attorney General or not, we need to keep that staff there suing PFAS manufacturers and opioid manufacturers and others that have harmed our state and that should be paying us the billions that Dana Nessel is bringing in. And I just want to take a second to talk about Secretary of State as well. Like, who cares what you think about Jocelyn Benson? We all have to go to the DMV. We all have to deal with that system. And I don't know about you, but has anyone else realized that the experience at the Department of Motor Vehicles in Michigan is palpably different and better, isn't it? Right? So they're attacking her because they don't like her and her politics and the fact that she's a Democrat candidate. And in doing so, they're hurting all of us. Everybody has to deal with the DMV. And I hope that it continues to be an easier, better experience like it has been under Benson. I mentioned that they're cutting the University of Michigan, and this is all to create black ink in the budget to pay for roads. And I would love to come up with a good roads plan. I'll talk about that in just a second, but I just want to mention that I am also concerned about the many potholes in the human service system here in the state of Michigan. Our mental health system, the system we have to care for seniors and disabled people, these systems need help and support as well. People who are struggling with poverty need help and support. Our education system is a top priority of mine. I see potholes in the education system. So I'm not willing to ignore all of those potholes to fix these potholes over here, particularly when, under the current formula, when you pay your gas taxes, each of us gets $154 per person from the state to fix roads in our county. Washtenaw County gets $154 per capita out of the road funding formula. The same formula that they want to push another $3 billion through provides between $300 and $500 for all the rural counties per person. So for every dollar that you put into the road funds, 2 or 3 times as many dollars go to Otsego, Ogama, Wexford, Mackinac County, then come to Washtenaw. You know what other counties are the losers in this current regime? Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, Genesee, Kalamazoo, Kent, Ingham. Every county where people live and where the revenue comes from is a big giver. And the Republicans and the governor are trying to convince all of us to put a lot more money through that same system. The real problems with our roads are in our local roads. And if we could fix the formula to get more money flowing to our local roads instead of the highways and freeways, and we could fix the formula so that the road funding formula was fair and sent roughly the same amount of money back to each community, we would see a lot more revenue to fix roads in places where the roads are the worst. And I don't know about anyone else. I drive around a lot in northern Michigan and the roads up there are a lot better. Well, that's because they get 2 to 3 or sometimes more times as much money per person. So what can we do about all of this? I wanted to give you that all that background. What's the next step? I think that we've got a couple weeks here, maybe a month before this budget gets done. I would be very unsurprised with the state shutdown. But what we need to do over the course of the next month to diminish the chance that there's a state shutdown and to make sure the voters know who's on their side is we need to communicate with the voters of some of these Republican reps that are allowing this kind of nonsense to get passed in the Michigan House. And there's a lot of talk about the Republican speaker, Matt Hall. Forget about him. He doesn't matter. I'll tell you who matters. Who matters is Representative Kathy Schmaltz. She represents Chelsea and she represents Jackson. This is a 50-50 district. It's a district that Republicans should not hold. It's a district that we should make our personal mission here at WCDP to flip. And she voted for all this nonsense. How does Matt Hall get his power? How does the speaker get his power to do the dastardly deeds he does? It's people like Kathy Schmaltz. I'm going to talk about Riley Linting downriver in Brownstown. Here's somebody who, holds a district that is a 50-50 district. She's the one who's giving the power to Matt Hall to cut our schools, to cut our mental health system. So I would focus on people like that. I'd focus on Representative Frisbee in Battle Creek if you want to drive a little further. If you know people in these communities, please reach out to them and explain to them what their representative is doing. Because I can promise you that these representatives don't want their voters to know what they voted for a couple weeks ago. So with that, I'll stop. I don't know if we've got time for questions or not. Thank you.
One question? Thank you. Lyndon, right there, right there.
Oh,
right there.
ah.
There we go.
You briefly mentioned it there at the end, but what's going on with school funding, like K through 12 school funding? Are teachers going to be paid this year? Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, if state government shuts down, school districts are really going to struggle with paying their educators because they're going to count on a payment from the state pretty early in the year. Now, as districts do have flexibility that they can sometimes use to work around that. Sometimes they have resources, sometimes they can borrow. So that decision is going to be made on a district by district basis. But if the state does not get a budget done by October 1st, every public employee, including teachers, including municipal employees, are going to be asking the same question, and they're going to have to work with their local government or local school district. So as far as the general funds for school aid, I think I started off with that. We're looking at a roughly $21 billion budget on both sides. And, the Democrats are trying to drive those dollars towards some of these key priorities that relate to education, and the Republicans are trying to condition the receipt of these dollars on anti-trans and anti-diversity policies.
Thanks, Lyndon. Thank you, Senator Irwin. Thank you.
Before the next person comes up, can we get the panelists for the 11 o'clock panel to come up and sit down now? That way we don't have to worry about the shuffle. So we have name tags for everyone.
Yeah. Find your place behind your name tag. I want to thank you, Senator Irwin. I just want to say, I'm so proud to be a Democrat. I know every single one of our elected representatives has been at a town hall where somebody says, it doesn't matter who I vote for, you guys are all the same. That is so false. And I just am so proud of what Democrats stand for. And thank you, Senator Irwin, for being out there. Well, every elected, somebody who's been elected or is currently, or, is elected, just wave. Hello, hello, hello. Yeah, elected representatives, you too. Oh, the electeds do so much work for so little money and so little thanks. And so thank you. Thank you, all of you people who are really serving. I want to say also, Cheryl's comment about, where Cheryl went, about the Constitution not working. Just a few of us the other day heard about Harvard is offering a free online class. It's the Harvard Constitution class. I haven't had a chance to Google it yet. I just learned about it yesterday. And the person who told us about it, I can't remember who it was, but just said, it is amazing. It's a 6-part class, I think, and it gave them so much hope and a sense of so much power. So just Google the Harvard Constitution class. It's free. It's free, right. And I'll just, in addition to something that Jeff said, I'll vote for somebody named Denzel any day of the week, twice. Okay, so come on up, Charlie, you got a few minutes.
Thank you. I will try to keep it quick. Okay, so let's have a little energizer. All right, if I repeat after me, tax the rich, fund our schools. So we've heard a lot about school funding. It is in a dire situation. It is way more complicated to fund our schools than Jeff has even begun to say. And, like talking about potholes, our school parking lots have potholes, and bonds and millages are failing at high rates. There's no roads money coming into those schools to fix those potholes. So like Parchment, they had a bond that failed and they could not fix their leaking roof. They're trying again. So school funding is an emergency, and we are doing something called Invest in My Kids, which is a ballot initiative to tax the rich to fund public schools. So we're talking about adding a 5% fair share surcharge onto individuals earning over $500,000 or couples earning over $1 million. Does anyone object to taxing the rich to fund our public schools? Okay, great. So I'm collecting petition signatures. If you are also collecting petition signatures, please please raise your hands. Thank you. We will be here. I know we have some people who have to dip, and that's perfectly great, but we will be here asking people to sign. I also need volunteers. So we need people to organize their community, collect signatures, but we're also getting creative. Like if you live in a retirement community, you can host a guest book so that people in your community can just come by and, sign it. So I'm going to be passing around this clipboard. Please sign up to help us. We will be outside in the hall there to collect signatures afterwards. And I have this beautiful PowerPoint presentation, and I could go through it, but I don't want to take the time. Maybe we can send the PowerPoint out with the notes so that people can at least see that.
We can send out the PowerPoint. And also I just want to, and Annie, where are you? Yeah, Felicia. Don't sign the petition twice. Okay. Somebody, actually Mallory Monroe's person said, and I'm like, how do you keep track of all the petitions you signed? She suggested taking a picture of every one. You sign a petition, take a picture of it so you remember, because otherwise you're going to invalidate the petition. So be sure you know what you're signing. I also just wanted to say, and Annie, come on up. I just want to say that the potlucks, Debbie said, don't get tired. Of course we're going to get tired. We're exhausted. But get tired in community. Get tired and come to community to get rewired and refired. And every month at the potlucks, we will be doing not only the training, but also we'll be doing direct action like more petitions. Okay, that's it. I'm so happy to introduce Annie Somerville, who needs no introduction, who organized this incredibly important panel, distinguished panel, about landlords, holding landlords responsible. We all know that nobody can afford the rent. So here we go. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you. All right. Well, just a few things before we get started. There's a lot of seats that are available. If people could maybe help shuffle in just so that the door isn't cluttered, that would be really great. Just in case there's an emergency, we need to have the door clear. So thanks everyone for being here. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So we in the programs committee have been trying to talk about how we can facilitate programs to get people to understand some of the issues that are more like closer to home to us. And one issue that I think often people don't think enough about is how often tenants get taken advantage of by bad landlords, and how little people might or not like know about their rights as tenants. And so for anybody that follows me on social media, I've been dealing with a huge issue in my district for almost a year. We have a multi-unit apartment complex, Arbor One in Ypsilanti, who you might have seen or heard about on the news, where there are hundreds of tenants living in currently condemned units, and there have been in and out actions taken in court to try to get them some relief, but it's very complicated. Everyone on this panel is in some way either involved or organizing for tenants' rights outside of the Arbor One situation. And so I will have all of them introduce themselves, and then if you could say your name, where you're from, like what you're representing here, and your pronouns, that would be great. And then we'll get started with some questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Start that in.
Is it on already? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Kristen Kuran. I go by she, her. I'm with the Fair Housing Center of Southeast and Mid-Michigan, and I am the incoming executive director. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Annie, for inviting the Fair Housing Center to talk about these pressing issues. As we all know, housing is the cornerstone of, well, I believe everything: access to our healthcare, access to education, job stability. So I just really appreciate taking the time, and thank you for asking me to be here.
My name is Ellie Savit. I am the Washtenaw County Prosecutor. I guess these days I should also say I'm a candidate for Michigan Attorney General. And thank you. And you might wonder, like, well, what is a prosecutor doing on a housing panel? I've had experience, unfortunately, with the Arbor One situation. We have sued, and I can talk a little bit more about the public enforcement piece. We sued Arbor One alongside the city of Ypsilanti. I assume I'll talk more about the merits of that case in a little while. But I also, actually, my previous job at the city of Detroit did some work going after bad landlords and their entire portfolios as well. So I really bring to this conversation less a direct advocacy piece and more a public enforcement piece, which I think is a really crucial part of this puzzle.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sheila. I am an organizer with the Ann Arbor Tenants Union, and in my day job, I am a legal aid person who also works with Arbor One, so that's how I'm familiar with that case. And I'm sure that all of us could talk about housing for hours, so thank you for having us to talk for maybe one.
I'm Jules. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm a part of the Arbor One Tenants Union. I'm one of the leaders.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for your introductions. I'm just going to throw out a few questions and then we'll open it up to the audience after that to get the conversation generating. So I'd like everyone maybe to go down and we'll start from this end and work our way back this time. And just if you could think of like one of the most important things that you think renters in Michigan should know about their rights. I know it's hard to pick one, but you can pick one or two. I'll allow that. If you want to start, Jules, or do you want someone else to go first?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll let Ellie go first.
Okay. Well, so once again, coming at this from the hooks that we have as a public body in the prosecutor's office, I'll just say that when we sued Arbor One, there were really two theories that we had, two hooks that we had to help protect tenants. Prosecutors, we don't represent individuals in court, so we can't represent individuals' tenants. We represent the people of the state of Michigan as a whole. And what happened at Arbor One was that the conditions at Arbor One were dilapidated. They were really horrific living conditions. And Arbor One was continuing to rent out apartments even though they lacked a certificate of compliance from the city of Ypsilanti. And a certificate of compliance is basically a certificate that says this apartment, this dwelling unit is up to code. It is safe and it is habitable. I think that from my perspective, what would be really important for everybody to know is that is a legal requirement in the state of Michigan. If a landlord is going to be engaged in the landlord business, Michigan law says, basically it's got to be someplace that people can actually live in and that is safe to live in. And if your landlord lacks that certificate of compliance, they are renting that apartment out illegally, and you then have rights. Now, the hook that we were able to get Arbor One on was under the Michigan Consumer Protection Act, because we said, look, you're basically advertising these apartments as safe and habitable when we know that they're not, because they don't even have the basic certificate of compliance from the city. And that's where public enforcement can come in. If a landlord does not have that certificate of compliance, there's stuff that we can do in the prosecutor's office. There's stuff that the city can do. Of course, we co-plaintiffed in this case with the city of Ypsilanti. So that's just one thing to make sure you're checking on, right? If you think something is amiss, you think like, God, these conditions are really not what I expected. It may well be that your bad landlord in this example has pulled the wool over your eyes, right? Has advertised something that they are not providing, and that is against the law, and that's where public enforcers can take action.
Awesome. Anybody else want to go next? Just kind of call. Okay, awesome. Let's go to Kristen and then.
Right. Well, so since I work for the Fair Housing Center, that's mostly, of course, what I can speak to. And so for me, what's important in the state law is the Michigan Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. So my office, we take complaints of illegal housing discrimination, and we enforce the federal Fair Housing Act, and then we enforce the additional protections granted by the by ELCRA. So for me, what folks need to know is that they have avenues for protection underneath the Fair Housing Act, the ELCRA, and of course, local protection. So it's a broad, I don't know, I went over the one rule, but it's the one item, but it is the Civil Rights Act. So in Michigan, I think you all know this, we added source of income recently, but before that, there was already marital status, age, and more recently also sexual orientation and gender identity. So we have additional protections that the Fair Housing Act can help people, not necessarily go to court, but that is where many of our cases end. But we can help just advocate for folks of their fair housing rights. You're entitled to these rights. So that is what I would definitely do education and advocacy on.
Yeah, could you maybe talk a little bit about how folks that have different ability issues might be taken advantage of in the rental space?
Sure. So the Fair Housing Act, the number one complaint to my office right now is people with disabilities, physical, mental, emotional, and we help with everything from emotional support animals to having somebody who needs a ramp or maybe they need a parking space near to their unit for mobility issues. We can help with, in the case of Arbor One, we were encouraging anyone with a disability, if they're having mold issues, if they're having, any part of inaccessibility, the Fair Housing Act says you bend the rules. Every other part of the Fair Housing Act is you have to maintain the same rules for everyone for equity and equality. But for people with disabilities, you bend the rules to make it accessible, to level the playing field, to level accessibility to your own home. There.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll go to Sheila now.
So I'm just going to talk about two of our campaigns that we've done in the past. One of them is the right to renew, or the early leasing ordinance. I'm sure some people are familiar with it, particularly in the city of Ann Arbor because of the student housing demographic. What we were seeing is that students would move in September, and then 3 months into their lease, their landlord would come up to them and say, okay, now decide, are you going to be here next year? And many students didn't know, am I going to go on a study abroad? Do I like this landlord? Do I want to enter into a contract right now in October and November? And so the early leasing ordinance set a period by which you would have the right to think about, has this landlord been good? Have maintenance issues been resolved quickly? Am I happy in my neighborhood? Do I know where I'll be next year? So your right as a tenant here is only until 180 days into your lease are landlords able to come to you and say, would you like to renew? And then you have at least 30 days to decide. You don't have to decide right away. So that's one thing that we worked on that was passed. And another thing more recently, as of this year, is the pre-tenancy fee ban. And so that's something that we worked with Travis Radina, Councilmember Travis Radina, Councilmember Cynthia Harrison. We worked with the Renters Commission. And, this was after some surveys that we saw through the university, as well as talking to tenants where they were saying, I just paid a $400 waitlist fee. I paid $400 to be on a list to potentially see an apartment, not to rent it, just to look at it. And this was not uncommon. There was one that we saw where each roommate had to pay $75 to apply. So if you have 6 roommates, you're each paying, $500 total. And so what the pre-tenancy fee ban did was say that there is a limit of $50 that can be paid for an application, and anything else, to pay to tour an apartment, that's crazy. That's not allowed. The upsetting thing, though, is that only applies for the city of Ann Arbor. That doesn't apply for the city of Ypsilanti, which is also in Washtenaw County. So we see issues like Arbor One, where we have landlords coming in saying, we want you to pay $700 for redecorating. Redecorating what? What does that even mean? It's not a security deposit. It's just a fee that every single person has to pay. And so there should be, I think, in Washtenaw County, some bleeding over in some of these rights and protections. And so that's something that I would really like to see moving forward. But for Ann Arbor, those are the rights.
Thanks. I'll just jump into and say there is legislation that's been introduced in the state Senate related to junk fees. I just wanted to add that little note in there.
Yeah, I think my main thing would be the organizing side of it. That once you get together with the actual tenants in your neighborhood, there's a lot that you can actually do to move forward or get things going, I guess, with repairs as well, is one main thing. Or I guess it would not repair so much as I've lived in Arbor One, and it was very hard to get them to really do anything, but going into the office with a group of people that are advocating together for whether that be we want to move out or we want them to move us from our condemned unit, it's a lot of help to just do it together.
Yep, cool. And then I'm gonna add this piece. One of the points that Sheila made, sometimes people think like that county government where I work, that we could have blanket ordinances across the county to fix some of these things. That would be great. I would love if we had that type of power. Unfortunately, we don't. And so over the course of some of the work that we've been doing at Arbor One, I've kept a list of things that I would like to advocate for Ypsi City Council, where I live in the city of Ypsilanti, some changes for them to make. But we also have townships across the whole county that could also benefit from increasing some protections for renters. Not every city prior to changes in state law even added, like, have a non-discrimination ordinance locally. But the two that did, City of Ann Arbor and City of Ypsi, added source of income. But for years prior to that, the state hadn't made any changes because Democrats weren't in power. So there's a lot of ways to advocate in the local township or city that you live in. So hopefully this will inspire some of you to reach out to your township or city officials. I will go right there. Do we have a mic out in the audience? Well, we need it for the recording.
Okay, I have an experience with a grandmother that inherited 5 of her grandchildren because her daughter was murdered. And she was living, now, do you do Wayne County also? No, this is strictly Washtenaw.
Well, we could probably answer a question related.
Well,
to
I
something that
guess the
happened in
question is, when she had her children move in with the grandchildren, it was in an 800 square foot apartment with five children from a year old to 10. And the landlord was horrible. And I wanted to know, like, I mean, we helped her get moved out of there into a home, but who do you go, who should I have gone to in Wayne County? Nobody seemed to listen. And then for Washtenaw, I've got a friend right now that lives on Browning Street in an apartment complex. And they don't ever have a front door that locks. And I've approached them.
Yeah.
And they've threatened to throw him out if I bother them anymore. How do you handle something like that?
So I could maybe give an answer really quickly and then anybody else can. So like the issue that you just referenced in Washtenaw County, that's Ypsi.
Yeah.
They would need to reach out to the local municipal government, whether it's a city or the township. I think that's the township. They have an ordinance office, and I can, after this, I can give you the contact information on the website for the ordinance office. So we don't have anybody here from a local unit of government. Partially because there are ongoing issues with Arbor One that are happening in court, and I didn't think it would be appropriate to have somebody from their ordinance office. But I did think about trying to get somebody from a local municipal government to kind of talk about their role. The locals have ordinances, and they're the ones that kind of do the checks and balances with the International Building Code.
Yeah.
And so the door issue is something that the local ordinance officer could enforce. And then it was unclear to me the issue in Wayne County. Obviously, the woman was living in a space that was small.
Yeah. And
Somebody
upstairs,
passed away, kid
yeah.
came in, but you didn't get specific on what the landlord was doing. And so maybe if you could be more specific, then somebody could answer that part of the
Yeah.
question.
He was paying $1,000 a month, and there was no running water. The toilets didn't work. When you called the landlord or contacted him, they got to the basement to get the water running, but then the hot water heater broke And I mean, it was just a constant thing where
Okay,
nothing.
so those are also like local ordinance related issues. So whatever the local municipality, and then I'll pass it on to,
Okay.
it looks like Sheila has an
Yeah,
answer.
the main thing now is my friend on Browning. I've had county people out there or local, and there's a loophole somehow that if you have only this many units, and then you don't have to do anything. So
That's not true. There's no loophole like that.
Yeah, so I'd be real interested in
Yeah,
finding out.
I'll connect you afterwards to the township ordinance office.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep. Okay, it looks like Sheila had a response to provide. If you could, would you guys mind? Yeah.
And this is based on my knowledge of Wayne County from speaking to, the Detroit Tenants Union and Lakeshore Legal. My impression of Wayne County compared to, Washtenaw County in terms of prosecution is that it's not nearly as friendly for tenants. I know that there are huge issues with certificate of compliance in Detroit. And so in terms of enforcing, ordinance violations and certificate of compliance violations, it's, you're like got like a million things to get at. And so in that case, what I've seen is, it is far more likely that you will have your issue addressed because there's so many people with issues if you are working with other tenants in your building. So in the case of the Detroit Tenants Union, if you are having repeat issues within your apartment building, I know that they have an apartment full of seniors right now that are having similar issues. And they're getting together in meetings and they're sharing what the violations are, and then they're having press conferences, and then they're having meetings with management, and then management is now trying to come to the table and make repairs happen faster. Sometimes that is a quicker process than going through a legal system, which frankly in Detroit does not have the resources to respond. Mhm.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Do we have any online that we want to try to fold in now? Okay, I think the one question might have already been answered related to fees. Okay, anyone on the audience want to throw another question out? Oh, yeah.
And a really great online tool. I'm not a lawyer, but I work very closely with Legal Services of South Central Michigan, and MichiganLegalHelp.org. If you're not familiar with that website, is excellent. You are. So, and I'm not, sometimes repairs can be, depending on their lease, if it's a year lease and depending on your contract, you're supposed to have a habitable house. So obviously we know that that's not followed, but all the time. But you can put your rent in escrow. It's a whole issue, and you have to do it very specifically according to the law. But that is one avenue you can look at, and I highly recommend that website.
Do we have an audience mic? Okay, awesome. It'll be better for the people online if you talk into the microphone. Thanks, Dirk.
Prosecutor Savit, are the penalties bigger than the advantage of renting illegally?
No. And that's one thing we need to change in our laws. There needs to be much stricter penalties and higher fines attached to, especially intentional violations of health and safety laws here. And I want to break that down for just a second, because this does vary depending on communities. But in most communities, what happens if your landlord lacks a certificate of compliance and repairs need to be made is the tenant has to put their rent in escrow, and the landlord can then draw from that escrow to pay for the repairs that they should have made in the first place. So there's really, if you look at it from a landlord's perspective, right, there's really no disincentive to let your properties get into a dilapidated condition, because you say, look, even if these become so bad that the city comes around and pulls my certificate of compliance, then all that's going to happen is I'm going to have to like pay for the repairs that I should have made in the first place, right? So there's really no loss there. We need to change that calculus. It's one of the things that I like about bringing a Consumer Protection Act violation, because there's potential civil fines that go along with that. But as a general matter, we really need to change that calculus, because if landlords will just be at the back end in the same financial position they would have been had they done the right thing to begin with, why wouldn't they just take the risk and say, you know, look, the city's probably not going to pull my certificate of compliance. In a city like Detroit, I think like 90% of units don't have certificates of compliance because the enforcement capacity is really lacking there, right? So yes, we have to fundamentally change the calculus so that if a landlord gets caught, they're going to get the hammer.
Can we just fix it ourselves? Can I fix this guy's toilet, for example? Can I fix this guy's toilet? Am I allowed to do that?
Can you fix the toilet?
Yeah.
Like
Can I
right
just
to
show up with
repair?
a lock on
What
his
you're-
door? Is that legal?
What you're talking about, just for people, like you might have heard something like similar, like right to repair. That's kind of like the buzzword around what Dirk just kind of described. So I'll let Sheila answer that.
Yeah, well, the right to repair is actually moving through the state Senate right now. It was introduced by Senator Anthony, and it basically says that if your landlord does not reasonably repair your toilet, then you, or maybe your friend, you have the right to repair it yourself and make the landlord pay for it. You can, I believe there are certain, requirements in there that if you're going to have somebody else do it, you have to get quotes from a certain number. It has to be reasonable. But if there are no repairs being made, you can, take it into your own hands and fix it. And I do hope that that gets passed. Yeah, that's right to repair.
Awesome, thank you. And I had another question, and like the ones that I came up with before this, just like to bring up, what would you change in state law? And Prosecutor Savit and Sheila just both mentioned areas in the law that could be improved. I don't know if Jules, if you have anything you'd like to add to that, or Kristen, any law, like any way you would like to improve the law in Michigan to better influence the work that you're doing?
Well, we need funding for fair housing in the state law. So I think we have some great protections, but without enforcement, they're pretty meaningless. So we're, as you probably know, HUD is under, the federal government is under some tight reins right now. And so any funding through the state level is what I need to be able to help people through the laws that we already have on the books. When we're talking about all these certificate of occupancies, I would love to see some kind of fair housing education, or I don't want to call it a tax, but some kind of, I don't know, I'm not a elected official. I don't know how all this works, but some kind of way that to get your certificate of occupancy, maybe there's a fee that goes into a education fund for, maybe it's not just fair housing, maybe it's just general landlord tenant rights. So that here's some literature on it, your staff goes to trainings, so that we can all understand, what protections are there. Like with this new source of income through the state, I'd like to be able to tell landlords at least what the law is, right? Like get the information out. I know Washtenaw Housing Alliance is working on doing these things, and they're fabulous. But I would like to have more money for the fair housing organizations to help to assist with that, that education and advocacy. So we need funding right now to be able to do it. I have all the tools. I just need to be able to help with tenant organizing, with getting the print materials, web materials. I know the fair housing centers in Michigan, but Washtenaw specific, we have all the ability to do it. We just need help right now. So
one thing I'll add too, and this is just for everybody to understand, slumlords get away with what they do, and not just our state, but across the country, because there are rules, there are international building codes, and there are local ordinances, but the way local governments are funded, there is not adequate funding to actually have the capacity that you would need to have in a building department to even enforce the rules. And it's one of those things that, like, it sucks admitting that. I used to serve on Ypsi City Council. Arbor One isn't the only apartment complex in the city of Ypsilanti that has mistreated tenants. Part of the reason why they get away with it is because there's not enough capacity to even inspect all of the rental units. And that's across the entire state. It's not just an Ypsilanti City issue. It's happening everywhere in Washtenaw County where there are rentals right now. There's just not enough capacity. And that's a problem I think that needs to start, like, the state of Michigan needs to be more committed to that, because, you know, revenue sharing isn't real, like, what we get at the local and county level is not adequate enough to add this into the fold. When you look at all the other mandated services, even though under state law, safe housing is a right, and so it should be something that's prioritized in the budget. Jules, did you want to add anything? Can you pass the mic down? Oh. Do you have a question?
I mean, yeah, it's just mostly to piggyback that is, there should just be more accountability held towards landlords, I guess, whether it be raising the fees or, and putting those back into, raising the fees or putting them back into state and local government so that they can actually educate tenants as well on what their rights are, so that we also know when something isn't right as well.
Before we move on, I do feel like this, what you were saying is really important, because, you know, there aren't enough resources for the county in some way to uphold some of these ordinances. In terms of legal aid, we don't have nearly enough attorneys that are able to give their time to help low-income tenants actually do anything besides, you know, eviction prevention. It's difficult to do non-emergency related, you know, quality of life assistance. So that's where organizing comes in, which is that, at least for the Ann Arbor Tenants Union, we were contacted by the Renters Commission. We were notified of some of the housing quality of life that was going on in Courthouse Square, which is a low-income apartment complex in Ann Arbor for seniors. And they were having issues with a murder in the building, arson, drug dealing in the building, all from people outside getting in. No repairs were being made. There were cockroaches, bed bug infestations, and the city didn't, and the city and legal aid, we didn't necessarily have the ability in the past to prevent this. And they've now formed their own tenants union. They've had meetings with management. They've got 24-hour security in the building. There are no arsons happening right now, which is great. But they are no longer currently organizing. And they are no longer organizing because they have been threatened by their landlord, that they are not allowed to flyer. They are not allowed to door knock. The central tenets of union organizing, they are not allowed to do. And part of the issue is that there are no real protections outlined in the law besides potentially, you know, retribution against eviction. And so the landlord can do many things. They can't evict you, but they can threaten you. They can potentially not renew your lease. They can make your life a lot harder. And so one of the things that we really should have is, if we want to deal with some of these, you know, poor living conditions, is providing a right to organize. And that should be something that we have not just in the city of Ann Arbor, but also in the city of Ypsilanti. And I think that that would significantly at least lessen the load on the legal side, and also on the city side, I'm sure.
Then it looks like Prosecutor Savit has a response as well.
Yeah. One thing that local units of government can do too is to change their sort of escrow provisions for when a landlord lacks a certificate of compliance. I mentioned in response to Dirk's question that generally speaking under state law, what happens if a landlord doesn't have a certificate of compliance and is maintaining their home in uninhabitable condition is that the tenant still has to pay into escrow and the landlord can draw down from that to make repairs, which again, generally speaking, doesn't provide the right disincentive. In Ypsilanti, actually, though, and this is something that we've been able to get court orders on in the Arbor One litigation, Ypsilanti's ordinance says straight up, if you are renting without a certificate of compliance, the landlord is not entitled to rent for that period. The tenant does not have to pay it. And first of all, I think that makes sense because like the whole idea is you're the landlord, you have to fulfill your end of the bargain and provide a habitable home to somebody. And if you fail to do that, why on earth would you be entitled to rent for the period where the home was legally uninhabitable, was legally unsafe, right? The other thing that's important about ordinances like that is we've talked about the lack of resources for enforcement capacities, but in communities that have ordinances like that, which include Ypsilanti, which include Battle Creek, and Detroit has actually sort of a modified ordinance around that. But tenants can then take matters in their own hands and just say like, look, I'm straight up not paying you and I don't have to pay you because I know that this doesn't have a certificate of compliance until you get this up to code. So something like that is something that local municipalities can do, have done in Michigan. And I think it really changes the incentive structure in a positive way to force landlords to do what they should be doing anyway, which is just provide baseline safe and habitable housing.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just to do some follow-up on some of the comments in the chat. To be clear, the only municipality in Washtenaw County that has a cap on fees, junk fees, is the city of Ann Arbor. And so every single township or city would have to enact their own ordinance to limit the amount of fees. And then on the flip side of that, something could happen at the state level that says locals can't do that, just like they've banned local rent control, or the state could decide there's a statewide limit on how much landlords could charge for junk fees, which was part of the legislation that I mentioned earlier. But in Washtenaw County, unless I'm unfamiliar with some other townships or cities, I think the city of Ann Arbor is the only one who has actually enacted a local limitation. And then there's some other questions about the right to repair, and this might be a Sheila question. Will the right to repair allow the leaser to deduct the cost and value of time at fair market value from the lease?
I do not know. I would have to look at the specific language of Senator Anthony's bill. It might be the
What's
current version is available
Yeah.
online.
Yeah, so the bill number for that,
19? I don't know.
Senate Bill 19, we can look it up and then put it on the board. And then there's another question about using state funds as an alternative to federal funds to help people that the federal government does not help in their guidelines. So currently, and I'm not, there are other ways to get funding from the state for certain services, but MISTA is a pass-through for HUD. And so all of the housing dollars that flow through from the feds and MISTA have the same standards and guidelines. There's currently, not to my knowledge, any money passed down from the state for rental related issues that are about any of the things that we're talking about here, but I could be wrong. But as far as I know, there's no, and with the Arbor One case, we've been going back and forth with MISTA for quite some time about resources. Emergency relief is one that everybody knows that you can apply for if you're in a situation where you live in a condemned unit. But I've talked to folks that work directly with clients with housing choice vouchers, and even people with housing choice vouchers have had really difficult time even qualifying for the state emergency relief. So because there's a lot of guidelines and standards, and it's also, when you look at the amount that you could even get to help an emergency situation, it is pitiful. Yeah, it's not great. So do we have any other questions in the room? Okay. Kathy.
So part of the challenge in terms of real life and real people, is in Washtenaw County as well as elsewhere, is that there simply is not enough housing that is truly low income affordable for people who are usually working but low wage jobs. And so there's only a small amount of housing that they can afford. So the tenants themselves aren't going to rat out the landlords because they need a roof over their head, and they know if the landlord fixes it up, puts the money into it, he's going to raise the rent, and they will not be able to have housing, a roof over their heads for themselves or themselves and their families. So where there is a shortage of this housing, and again, the solution is more housing that is truly, that can be affordable. Sometimes it needs to be also supportive, but there are lots of folks that do not want, they're not going to, like I said, rat out the landlord. They're not going to organize because the alternative for them is homelessness, possibly.
Thank you for
Something to keep in mind.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I think this is why it's so important for the state and local governments to be doing regular inspections on rental properties and not put the tenants in the position where they have to self-advocate and potentially risk their housing status. It is uncomfortable for a lot of tenants. I've done a lot of door knocking at Arbor One with Jules and other tenants, and there are people who they're like, it's not that bad. But then when you start to ask them, they're like, oh yeah, I use my oven in the winter to heat my apartment. And we're like, that's totally not legal and it's super unsafe. Or they're using a space heater on top of a plastic tote in their living room. Again, super illegal, super unsafe. But they're terrified to say anything or don't even, so that's why it's really like the local unit of government, should be doing those inspections regularly so that the tenant's not putting themselves in that position. Sorry, I feel like I shouldn't be inserting myself as much as I am. So I'll let some of the panelists respond to that, but retaliation is real. Sheila?
I could just say, and this is maybe to pat the city on the back a little bit, I was really excited about the 121 East Catherine housing development that's currently being created, that I'm not sure when it's going to be on the market, but it's through the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. It's public housing, and a portion of it is actually low income housing, and then a portion of it is artist housing. And so it's very creative. I'm very excited to see what it will be, but I think that that's sort of a route that we should begin heading toward, is funding Ann Arbor Housing Commission more to do some of these projects. More public housing that actually serves a low-income community will, act as a deterrent against retaliation, because I can find new housing and it will be affordable.
Yes, thank you for adding that. Kristen, did you have something to add?
Thank you for that, Kathy. I am 100% agree with you. I just wanted to add that the Fair Housing Act is a little bit different than the landlord tenant portion of this. So under the federal law, retaliation is illegal. So if you come to my center, which all of our services are free, we do a lot of litigation, but we work with cooperating attorneys who they take cases that we give to them that we know are winning cases because we do undercover investigations. So if I have plenty of sexual harassment cases that the women are in those situations that Kathy's talking about, and we have looked at these again through our investigation methods, and we were able to keep the women safe, keep the family, find other folks to join our legal cases. And so this isn't about retaliation, but it's about the true real fact that you do not want to lose your housing. I mean, we don't want to be out in the streets with our kids. But retaliation, if I've had other cases where folks have talked to their landlords or been afraid to do that because they're exercising their fair housing rights, and it is basically you'll be in more trouble if you retaliate against someone for exercising their fair housing rights.
Yeah, I'll just also add, I'm a renter and it's rare, I served at the city level. When I was on city council, I was the only city council person who was an active rental at one point. And there's only 2 of us on the county board of commissioners. And I think it's sometimes even my landlords have treated me very well. I've been there a long time. I have no plans on moving. It's hard for people who aren't in a rental situation or have never rented. Like there are a lot of people. Are there anybody in this room who never been a renter? Okay, I mean, so you don't understand kind of the stress that comes with having somebody else really kind of responsible for your housing. But I think the thing that we've learned through like the Arbor One process, it doesn't matter what your income level is or your ability status. Nobody deserves to live in unsafe housing. And I think sometimes people think if you're low income and if you get a housing choice voucher, you should just be thankful for what you've gotten. And that's not okay. Even if you're low income, even if you get a voucher, you deserve to have adequate housing. And especially if our tax dollars are paying for your housing, the people who are profiting off of those vouchers should be providing safe housing to the tenants. I'm going to go to somebody who has not. Oh, right there.
So this isn't necessarily a comment. It's more kind of I don't have a question, but it's a comment that could be further explored. Has there been any consideration in utilizing the state of Michigan tax code that would, by example, requiring the filing of a certificate of occupancy with the state tax return so that the owner of the rental doesn't claim the rental benefits that they get on that tax return, which could require them to pay more tax. And if they can't file a certificate of occupancy, they can't file a tax return, or they're penalized $1,000 or $2,000 and lose the rental benefits they get tax-wise until that certificate of occupancy is submitted. I don't really like using the tax code for this type of stuff, but it is basically something. And instead of trying to do what you're doing now, you basically would have to work with your local government officials to be able to kind of push that through. I don't know all the answers to that, but it might be something
Anybody
to
want to take a
explore
stab at
further.
that? Okay, I think that might not be one that we can answer right now, but that's interesting. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go to somebody who has not asked a question in the back first, and then we'll come up to the front. Oh, sorry, right behind you. Yep.
Hi, I wanted to ask, can you tell us more about the Ann Arbor Tenants Union? Because I didn't even know Ann Arbor had a tenants union and I know nothing about it.
Awesome, good question.
And I'm a renter in Ann Arbor, so I'm curious.
Yes, I did not place this person in the audience. So the Ann Arbor Tenants Union actually has been going since the 60s. So we are just one iteration of it. We are a collection of tenants. You can be in an apartment building or you can be just in a single family housing. Either way, you can join. We have a group that is dedicated just to policy, so ordinance work, if that's something that people are interested in working on. And then we have a group that's dedicated for organizing, building level organizing. And so we've had several building level tenant union associations. Courthouse Square, which I talked about, is one of them. And through that, we work with tenants and discuss how they will go about flyering with their neighbors, collectively gathering, and then potentially entering into a bargaining process. And it is a very fun way to meet people in the community, if that's something that you're interested in, and also help advocate for their rights for safe living conditions. We also are organizing a statewide tenant union summit. So if you're interested in getting to know tenant union organizers across the state, that's something that will also be coming up. So if you want to join, talk to me. Yeah.
Awesome.
We do. It is AnnArborTenants.org. And you can look it up, and we've got a lot of information about what we've done in the past and what we might do in the future.
Also, I'll just add that when the Arbor One Tenants Union was formed, there was a lot of confusion between the Ann Arbor Tenants Union and the Arbor One Tenants Union. And there was a period of time where people were emailing the Ann Arbor Tenants Union, and they were very graciously forwarding those emails to the Arbor One Tenants Union, which was very nice. So thank you for that.
I think by the first meeting that I joined for the Arbor One Tenants Union, I kept calling you guys the Ann Arbor Tenants Union.
Yeah, I did that too. I think the first email I ever sent out for them, in the title of the email, I said Ann Arbor. So that was also my bad. Okay, we'll go white sweater and then up to the front.
This isn't really a question, it's more of like a comment as well to add how important it is for people that have never rented, or are not currently renting, to understand the issues that renters are facing, especially people like myself who have lived under slumlords. There was a time when my power went out, and it was not in Michigan, but in the state that I was in, the law says that they have a period of 6 days to come out and fix those issues. It was my fridge that went out and all my food went bad. They waited till the last day to come out, so that was 6 days. And the second time it happened, I tried contacting an outside electrical company that could possibly come in and try and fix it. And they said because it was a rental unit facility, they would not be able to help me, even though I was willing to pay them to do it for me. They said I had to go through the like property management company in order to do it, and they never answered any of their emergency maintenance emails. So
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. This just reminds me of all the tenants at Arbor One who have been dealing with lack of heat, lack of hot water, not just like a year ago, but still like actively, even in the middle of all the litigation happening, there are still people who are struggling with those basic human rights. Like what can you do without water? So thanks for mentioning that. And then we have a person up in the front in the burgundy shirt.
Hi.
Hello.
I kind of want to jump on what you said. I guess Arbor One is somewhat of an extreme example, right? But it's not that extreme, like talking about like fridges not working, and like what, especially when it's hard to get protection from like any governmental bodies, what do you do to like act against landlords to prevent something like that happening, especially when like oftentimes tenants are not protected, you know what I mean?
So I will see who wants to take it first. But one of the reasons why we have, I think, representation from folks who are actual tenants, who have been organizing, and folks from like the law side of it and the advocacy side, is to show that like it's a collective. It has to be a collective advocacy because people don't know the law, people need the support, people don't know where to start. And so who wants to take this one first? All right, let's go, Jules.
I mean, I think that just I guess talking to your neighbors would be a great start. Like education, so that we know exactly what our rights are, so that we know what is not okay, what we can do to keep going, I guess. Because I mean, to prevent it, I'm not really 100% sure, because I kind of just came in the middle, I guess, and it just kind of got, with the Arbor One situation, just kind of thrown on us, where my unit wasn't as bad as some of them are pretty bad. And I joined in with the tenants union, and we were already in court a little bit. And everyone was we just kept together, and we tried to keep, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit trying my best here, but yeah, I guess it's just education would be the way to start. Like, just know your rights, exactly what they are, and push for, or reach out to your sorry, the building inspectors, I guess the ordinances, so that if you do have an issue, you start from there.
And I feel like I'm just going to piggyback off of that, which is that, if you were only having one issue in your apartment and you went to Arbor One's leasing office and said, hey, can you fix it? I'm sure they would respond. They probably would not. But, your tenants union has over 130 members. And I think that there's a power in that. And when one person has a problem, you amplify it and you see, okay, how many of us have this particular problem? And then if there's 50 people having that one problem, it makes it very easy to go to, Eli and say, there are 50 people that have this problem. Can we fix it? And then, they'll go through the legal process, which may take a while. But we could also go to Annie and say, Annie, there are 50 people that have this problem, 50 people with no power. And I'm sure Annie will take it to the right person too. But you can't have that without that level of communication.
Yeah, and I mean, from the legal side, it is start with the local building inspectors, because that builds up the facts that if there were to be some enforcement action, we would need, right? I mean, ask your landlord, I guess, depending on how good they are, to fix it first, right? Sometimes things break, and if they're not, building inspector. But the other thing, and then it can escalate up the legal path. But the other thing I'll say too that can be powerful, and I think tenants unions have done a great job of that at amplifying publicly the conditions at the property, is like, if you've got a bad landlord that is refusing to make repairs, that is maintaining homes in unacceptable conditions, like, go on social media and put them on blast, right? Because at the end of the day, these landlords, these bad landlords, they are marketing something that they are not fulfilling, right? And it will hurt them, and it will maybe incentivize them to do better if they know that people are seeing that what they're selling is an illusion, and that in fact, if you rented this particular apartment complex, you can expect your refrigerator to be broken, or you can expect your heat to be out, or like they're not going to come and make repairs. So, again, on the legal side, building inspectors, but like, I know that the enforcement process and the legal process can be long and drawn out and complicated, and using your voice can really incentivize landlords to do the right thing, at least in some circumstances.
Real quick, add on to that. Call the press too, I mean, social media, great. I mean, that is where everyone's at, but also, staging up protests and, picketing. We've actually used some of those actions quite effectively over the years. And from the fair housing perspective, I have all these know your rights brochures and booklets and things, but of course it's on fair housing laws and protections. But we have a wealth of social service agencies in Washtenaw County. And I would say my office, we try to train with all of these different everything from social workers to legal organizations to counties we call it housing advocates training, among other kind of trainings. And what the point is to make sure everyone who's on the ground and working with folks like yourself who might call these agencies is to be able to then defer or refer to the agencies who can actually offer the help that's needed. So we do have a great network here and just try to utilize it.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. And part of the reason why I wanted to do this panel, even in the midst of all the other chaos happening, renters, especially renters that are in vulnerable situations, don't think anybody cares about them. And they often never get a knock on their door from the people who represent them at the local or city or state level. Sometimes because buildings are locked and they're not accessible for you to get into, like if they lived in a single family home or a multi-unit that's like a house that's been converted. So it's kind of hard sometimes. I've been lucky that I was able to get into Arbor One because they were so bad the doors didn't have locks on them. And so I was able to get into every single building because they hadn't fixed the door locks, which isn't good for the people who live there. There are a lot of safety concerns, but it actually gave me an opportunity to talk to people who I would otherwise not have been able to talk to unless you know a tenant inside the building. And so for everybody here, I know we come here once a month and we talk about a lot of high level issues. I would encourage you as a county commissioner and a former city council person to reach out to your local officials on township boards or city councils and ask them what type of outreach they're doing proactively before there's a crisis like Arbor One, so that people know who they are, know who to call when you do have an issue. When I was on city council, I would have people email me about one landlord in particular, send me pictures. They were scared to report it, and so I would submit anonymous complaints to the building department on their behalf. And I don't think people realize that they have city council members or township trustees that could do some of that stuff for them. And so you all should feel empowered, even though you might not be a renter. You should be asking your local officials what they're doing to help outreach to tenants, especially tenants who might be in vulnerable housing situations. Okay, we've got Janet, you had your hand up first, and then I think the last question will be in the back, and let's try to keep it to a question, and then we have to wrap up.
This is actually more of a suggestion. So we're here as a political party. So how do we take this information and these contacts and turn it into political action? One way that we can help is, for example, if you have a situation or you have I would say we have an audience. We have a website, we have a newsletter. So if you've got something particular coming on, send us something that's succinct, that lays out the situation, that says we want support for this. And if it's, if we can put it on social media, we can put it in our newsletter. We can't do a million times. We don't have enough volunteer power to write it all for you. But if you've got something you can send us, say, please get this out. That's what we're here for too.
Thanks. All right, last question, I think.
Yeah, and the other thing I would suggest is that you collaborate with other states. I know a little bit about this. The 3 states that have the best tenant protections statewide are California, Oregon, and Massachusetts. So I recommend you collaborate with them. Don't recreate the wheel. Everybody has these issues, and maybe Massachusetts can be the 4th one on that list soon.
Awesome, thank you. Before we close, I want to give the
Michigan.
panelists a second to wrap up their thoughts. And then sneak preview next month. I think we're going to have Todd from the prosecutor's office who works in the economic justice unit, and he can talk kind of more then about the way that the county prosecutor's office has been able to use that office to help tenants in Washtenaw County. So if you all want to do a little quick closing remark, we can start with Kristen.
I just want to say thank you for having me. And I hope if you didn't know about the Fair Housing Center before, Fair Housing Protections, that you do know a little bit more. And our website is fhcmichigan.org. You can find all kinds of resources and ways to contact us. And I just am grateful for you opening this conversation and having these high-level discussions. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo the gratitude. It's always great to be on panel with such passionate advocates, and stay tuned. I didn't know Todd was coming here next. Yeah, that's fine. No, it's fine. It's great. Stay tuned for Todd. He's better than me. So.
If you would like to get involved in the Ann Arbor Tenants Union, please talk to me or go to our website, annarbortenants.org. One of the big things that we have coming up, kind of echoing what you guys were saying, how do we translate this, is we've created a tenant bill of rights, and included in that are, the right to organize, the right to counsel, the right to a fair lease, and the right to repair. And so these are things that we want to get slowly pushed through either via ballot or via ordinance. And if you'd like to learn more, we also have somebody here who helped write it, is leading the charge, so I can push you toward them.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And there is also an Ypsi Tenants Union as well that you could reach out to if you have any issues in Ypsilanti. And then the Arbor One, I believe we have like a Facebook, or the Ann Arbor Tenants Union, or Arbor One Tenants Union, sorry, confusing myself, does have a Facebook. Yeah, join us if you are a tenant, and an Instagram as well. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone. And then as we wrap up, if folks who are able could help us put all the chairs back against the wall that aren't at tables, that would be a huge help for all of us.
Thank you, Annie Somerville, and thank you all for being here. It was really informative and really important stuff, important work. Whenever anybody tells you, contact your representative, and you go like, I wish I knew who it was. I'm kind of embarrassed. mivoter.org. Put in your street address, and you will find everybody who represents you and how to contact them. That is in the palm of your hand. Put mivoter.org, bookmark it. Everybody who represents you. I just want to add, this number sticks in my head. $50 trillion has gone from the bottom 90% to the top 1% in the last 30 years. Maybe 40. Maybe it took a little bit longer than 30 years. But all of the problems we're dealing with is as a result of that. In immoral wealth transfer. So just pay attention, find your reps, vote Democratic, and pay attention to who tax the rich, and pay attention in primaries, right? Because the primary voters determine who's on the November ballot. And we don't want corporate Democrats on the November ballot, right? So vote in primaries also. More on that as the months progress. Thank you all for being here. Take good care.